Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our backyard. Today I'd like to do a bit of an update on hummingbird plants because I have more of our plants that I've grown and planted for hummingbirds actually flowering nicely now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on the favorites right now for the hummingbirds in our Zone 9A garden. The first one I want to talk about is a fairly recent purchase. I had updated a couple of our hanging pots from our winter and spring mix, and I've put in the first salvia that's really a trailing salvia, and this is called Hummingbird Falls. Hummingbirds are very attracted to this. You can see from the shape of the bloom. Hummingbirds do like that long conical shape of a salvia bloom. So do the bees. Got a little bee over here loving Hummingbird Falls. But I've been really pleased with this plant. I've only had it a couple of weeks and it does trail nicely. I'm going to show you the second hanging basket. I really like the look of this. And I love the purple blooms and the dark calyx. And the hummingbirds like this. So it's going to be interesting to see how far down this will trail. And while I'm on salvia, I do have to say hummingbirds just never tire of salvia. None of the pollinators do. And Salvia Amante and Amistad, the pink and the purple here, is just a favorite of our hummingbirds. Another prolific bloomer that the hummingbirds are so attracted to is Cuphea, or cigar plant. This variety happens to be David Verity. It's one of my favorites. And in full sun, it just blooms and blooms and blooms. And you can see that long, slender flower that is bright. And the hummingbirds are so attracted to these type of flowers. I have multiple cigar plants in my yard because this is such a hummingbird favorite. This is a little bit shorter variety called Vermillionaire, but it also is a wonderful bloomer. And the hummers just go through here just systematically from bloom to bloom to bloom. Love this plant. I'm going to link at the top of this video about our annual vine that we plant from seed called the Cardinal Climber. And it is a cross between two vines, actually the red morning glory and the cypress vine. And I talk about this because it is surprising us with how early it's flowering this year. I know that we've had kind of a weird spring. We had an earlier spring, but our Cardinal Climber is way farther along this year than it was last year. And hands down, this is probably one of the favorites. I'm going to come down here of the hummingbird. And in peak season, we can have 400 to 500 blooms a day on this. And you just can't go wrong with having a prolific vine that flowers like this. It is airy right now because it's doing its climb, but when it is in its peak season, it's just a mass of green. It is just gorgeous. And in the fall, like I said, during hummingbird migration, we can have upwards of 400 to 500 blooms a day, and the hummingbirds just go nuts over this flower. Our Russelia or Firecracker plant had a huge bloom flush early this spring, and the hummers were all over it. Now we don't have a lot of hummingbirds. I see 2 or 3 in the area, and it is flushing out again very wonderfully. And again, they're small, long, tube-shaped flowers, and the hummingbirds go nuts for Russelia or Firecracker plant. This is an unusual flower. It is from the balloon milkweed, and I certainly didn't think that hummingbirds would be attracted to this. You'll notice it has dew on it this morning. It's early in the morning, and the hummingbirds do come for this. It's downward shaped, and I'm thinking that's one of the reasons I have observed hummingbirds on this particular flower. So it's not necessarily something I would think is a hummingbird attractor, but I see them on here. You have heard me mention porterweed, and I certainly can't not talk about porterweed when I'm doing a video update on hummingbirds. You know, plant for plant, this is just a stunner in the yard, meaning it attracts all the pollinators constantly throughout the day. And porterweed is one of the plants I have found that I will try to have in my yard all the time now, wanting to attract butterflies and hummingbirds. This happens to be a red porterweed, and if you ever have a chance to try one out, I would try it and see what you think and let me know. I mentioned the coral honeysuckle in a previous video went through a beautiful spring flush, and it is going through the beginning of June here, another beautiful flowering phase. And again, these tubular flowers are just so attractive to hummingbirds. The color, the nectar. This happens to be a native plant for East Texas. It's a native across a lot of part of the United States. But this particular honeysuckle, called coral honeysuckle, really has a lot of benefits to the wildlife, from the birds to the bees to the pollinators, all the different kinds of bees to the, and of course the hummingbirds. So if you ever get a chance to grow this, you don't have to trellis it. It prefers a trellis, but it will also grow along the ground as a ground cover if you don't want to put it up. This is for all you Texans. I would highly consider, because it's not super aggressive in its growth, and it doesn't hang with tendrils on the trellis. What it does, I'm going to kind of come in here, and you can easily prune it and prune it down, but it just grows through and weaves itself through a trellis, so it doesn't attach like with tendrils that can be a real hassle. So coral honeysuckle is a favorite of mine just for the sheer interest, but it's also a favorite of hummingbirds. The past 2 years in the Houston area, we have had some pretty severe freezes, and I felt bad because the 2 freezes really dealt our firebushes a blow, and we had to replant and replace. We had a huge firebush that even had a hummingbird nest in it, but they do grow beautifully, they grow quickly, and they are also, this one we had to replace, and it is new. It's just starting to get its blooms. These are tubular blooms. Let me come down and bring this grouping up. It is a pollinator favorite, not just hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are so attracted to it, but it's a pollinator favorite, and I have a couple of different varieties of firebush in the yard. This one has a smaller leaf, but they're just getting started and getting ready to bloom. So I'm really excited to have my Firebush looking so good, considering that it got really severely hit by our freeze. Turk's cap is another one of these Texas natives, and the flower color is just beautiful. Last year this plant, not at this time, but give it another month or so, was just covered, and you can see the buds are starting up all along this stalk. It never opens, and the hummingbirds just put their beak down in the center and get the nectar at the Turk's cap. I've got 2 Turk's caps, and they are blooming, just not a lot yet. Interestingly, I have one of the fruit here. They're like little, tiny little apples. And I harvested seeds from these last year, and that's where I grew my new Turk's cap. And I'm so happy to report that my hummingbirds are going to my shrimp plant. The shrimp plant I have mentioned is a first for me, and I purchased it at the end of February. So I'm not super familiar with the shrimp plant, but they do have these shrimp colored, and they look like shrimp bracts, and then underneath they have the flower. Let's see if this, there we go. Just a delicate flower, and the hummingbirds will come in and they hover in and they come under and get at the nectar. Very happy having these 2 shrimp plants because they've been prolifically flowering, golly, for really since the end of February. And finally, I am so surprised. This is my very tall Salvia madrensis, which is also called Forsythia sage. And last year it started blooming for us in October. We've had such a weird year this year, though, weather-wise, and I can't believe that I'm starting to see the bloom spike. These things get to be really tall. They're more of a shade salvia, so it's over here in my shade bed. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just stunned that these guys are starting to create their flower bracts. They can be 2 feet to 3 feet tall, and these plants have such large, thick leaves. They're very different for a salvia. I love this plant. It's like a salvia, you know, it looks more like celery. It's the square stalk, which gives it a lot of strength. And I will keep you updated on this because I am just stunned to see this flower spike starting. And it does produce gorgeous yellow blooms. So I've shared with you some of the favorite blooms in our yard for hummingbirds right now this spring. But I also want to say diversity really matters. Even though you notice that I have hummingbird feeders up, and I am going to do a video soon about hummingbird feeders because I do feel like I have quite a bit of experience on them, and I'm going to show you all the different types that I've had. They don't prefer that. The hummingbirds prefer the bugs and the blooms in the yard. And diversity is so key because once I've got one more plant to show you. I just found out that I forgot it, and this is the one that I wanted to show you. Isn't that how it goes? This is my flame acanthus, and when it blooms now, it should be blooming through the fall. I'm so tickled to see these blooms because this is a huge hummingbird favorite. Let's see if I can focus in. Yep. And you can see why, because of these tubular flowers. And I have quite a few flame acanthus plants in what we call our trellis bed. I'm so excited to see these blooms. The hummers so enjoy these. It's also a native plant to Texas, and it's a host plant to the Texas crescent butterfly. Sorry about that last minute interruption there. But as I was mentioning, diversity makes such a difference because yes, I've seen hummingbirds on many different types of my blooms. I've seen them on lantana, I've seen them, visit my mandevilla, I've seen them visit my all of my hibiscus. These happen to be the flowers that they're visiting right now, but diversity makes such a difference, and it's such an impact because the more diversity you have, the more you're gonna see. So it's not just putting up one plant here or there. Definitely start small and put up your feeders. But what that does is these plants and these diversity of plants, and especially if you can tuck in a few natives here and there, gives you then the bugs, the little gnats, the little bugs that they're going after. And you'll find that the more you include and the more diversity you have, the more success you will have in attracting hummingbirds to your yard. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me this morning. I hope you are enjoying your hummingbirds. If you have hummingbirds in your area, comment below and let me know what flowers your hummingbirds are loving visiting at the moment, because I know they're going north and they are going to their final destinations, and plants are so different all along the way. So share what you're seeing right now. All right. I hope you all have a wonderful day.